What's up, friends? Welcome back to the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. We are back. I am Shaw Local Bears beat reporter Sean Hammond. Joining me, as he does every Monday and Friday, is Shaw Local's very own Michael Dwojak. It's Packers week, Bears versus Packers Sunday at Soldier Field. I know everybody across Chicago is locked into this game. There's nothing else going on in Bears world, is there, Michael? It's a game week, right?
Yeah, no one's focused on anything else other than the Packers, right? I mean, what a week, huh? I feel like I saw the 30 Rock meme a lot where it's like Baldwin's like, what a week, and it's like it's Wednesday 11. So I feel like you saw a lot of that this week where I was like, man, a lot has happened here since we talked on Monday. There's been so much that's gone on here.
There absolutely has, and you're right. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't give the Green Bay Packers 1 second of thought until probably like yesterday afternoon at some point. Like,
Right.
that's how crazy of a week it has been. That's honestly, like, you wonder. I know these guys are professionals and they got to be locked in, but like, there's got to be some of that going on in the building too. Of course, Bears fans, you all saw that the Bears let go of Shane Waldron on Tuesday. Yeah, we did our Monday show. We didn't know what was going to happen at the time. Matt Eberflus says he didn't know. He mulled it over for another 24 hours. He said even Monday night he wasn't quite sure. He was still deciding what to do. He did say he met with Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren and George McCaskey, as he does every Monday. Obviously, you would love to be a fly on the wall for that conversation. We don't really know who was pushing for what, but at the end of the day, Matt Eberflus fired Shane Waldron on Tuesday morning and promoted Thomas Brown as offensive coordinator. Michael, your thoughts? What stands out to you after this decision?
Well, this was probably like the worst kept secret, right? Especially, after what happened over the weekend. Even last week, I think a lot of people were like calling for Shane Waldron's job, and Matt Eberflus kind of pushed that off. But after what you saw against the Patriots, I don't think there was anyone. Someone had to go. Just bad offense looked bad. You haven't scored a touchdown in 2 games, 23 straight possessions. So it wasn't really a surprise that happened. I know some people were like, maybe Matt Eberflus was going to lose his job, but at this point, I'm kind of the mindset of like, I don't know how much that really benefits anyone at this point. Just you kind of have to go with the flow and see if you can get a spark here at this point. And that's exactly what's going to happen here with Thomas Brown, or at least they're hoping it's going to happen with him. It seems like he's kind of taken more of a direct role. A lot of interesting comments from the players, obviously, after Shane Waldron was fired, which obviously we can go over. But not really surprising that he was fired. Not really surprising that Thomas Brown took over. And it'll be interesting to see what bump, if any, this really has on Sunday's game.
Yeah, it will be. I mean, Thomas Brown brings a good energy. He's a former player himself. He briefly, for a couple of years, played at the NFL level as a running back. I think that does matter. He's, he's 38 years old. Not that Shane Waldron was old, but he's certainly closer. I mean, he's younger than Mercedes Lewis, so he's like closer in age to a lot of these players. I think that they will respect him and look like. Everybody saw the Keenan Allen quote about how Shane Waldron might have been too nice. And yeah, maybe that's part of it. Just holding guys accountable is going to, I don't think Thomas Brown is going to be afraid to do that. Having been in their shoes, having been a former player, from just talking with him over the last few months since he got here in Chicago, like, I don't think that that's going to be an issue. But at the end of the day, like, the players are the same. The offensive scheme is the same. You hope that Thomas Brown can bring the creativity that Matt Eberflus said he's looking for, but we really don't know. And it's not going to be an easy start. They got a Green Bay Packers team who is good, a Green Bay Packers team that ranks pretty highly in a lot of defensive metrics. It's not going to be an easy place to start here. Of course, you got the Vikings and the Packers and the Lions coming up the next couple of weeks too. This is going to be a really tough stretch. I do want to ask you, Michael, like, big picture, what do you think all of this means for Matt Eberflus?
Well, this is his last ditch effort, right? Like, if this doesn't work, I don't really know how you can keep him after this game. I mean, the record is what the record is at this point. I don't know it off the top of the head, but it's bad. I mean, obviously, I know the first year was more of a rebuilding year, so you kind of gave him some leniency there. You saw some growth last year. You saw him pull the team together at the second half, and that's kind of why I think Ryan Poles decided to keep him for this year. But listen, at this point, like it hasn't worked, right? Like you were supposed to be at a different position than 4 and 5 at this point. I've seen the numbers. There are 8 coaches that he's already gone through in his 2.5 or 3 years with the team. So listen, if this doesn't work, I don't really, I think there needs to be a big discussion talked about, just what is the future of this team and who you're going to bring in, because feel like a lot of people are already you're seeing some regression with Caleb. He's learning some bad habits. His timing is off once you look at the tape. So it's just kind of like you need to fix this if you're the organization pretty quickly. And Matt Eberflus either shows you that Thomas Brown is the answer at this point, or you just need to move on pretty quickly because you can't mess up your number 1 overall pick like that.
No, you can't. But at the same time, I don't think that I think they're going to give this a few weeks. Certainly, I would bet my money that Matt Eberflus lasts through the regular season and he's fired in January. Yeah. I think you got to give this thing a few weeks before you do anything with the head coach spot. Like Thomas Brown just took over. It's going to be a work in progress. He said himself that there's no quick fixes and we're not really looking for quick fixes. Like it might take a little time. I don't know if this is going to look a whole lot better on Sunday against the Packers than it has the last couple of weeks. Hopefully, one of the things that Caleb said was he could use a few more layups. And I think that's true. Like your rookie quarterback could use a couple more easy tosses here and there. And everything has been hard for this offense the last few weeks. Even the short passes, like the little toss out to DJ Moore that got blown up. Like on paper, those are like the easy completions and that should pick up a few yards and literally nothing has been working. I don't have to tell you guys that. You guys are all, we got lots of Bears fans in the chat. I know you guys have been watching this team and you understand that too. So if Thomas Brown can get Caleb Williams a couple of easy ones here and there, that's going to make a big difference for the offense. I do think that we'll see maybe a little bit more commitment to the run. Like I think that they tried to do that early in that game against the Patriots and then kind of went away from it. And I don't know that you can do that. I think you gotta. I could see a big game for DeAndre Swift coming up. Again, it's a tough defense. I think having some guys back on the offensive line will help. If you're joining us here on YouTube, thank you. Hit the thumbs up. That's a great way to support the show. We really appreciate you joining us here. We will get to your thoughts and comments. I see you guys already have lots of thoughts and comments already. If you're listening after the fact on Apple or on Spotify, keep an eye out on our Twitter pages. We'll let you know when we're going live. And do us a favor, leave us a review over there. That's another great way to support the show. As always, head to shawlocal.com. You can read all of our coverage. I know you guys have been reading a lot of stuff this week about Thomas Brown, about Shane Waldron. It's been a crazy week. Before we sort of dive into our game preview stuff, I do want to stick here on this conversation. And, we're talking about what this means for Flus, but what does it mean for Caleb? Like when you look at Caleb, do you see regression? Is that, I feel like that word is thrown around a lot. And I feel like it's thrown around a lot after a bad game. And it's like, okay, he was without his 2 starting tackles. I don't know what else you want him to do out there on Sunday. I think that word has been thrown out a lot in the last couple of weeks. And yeah, it's been a bad 3-week stretch. But what does this change mean for Caleb and I guess his progression and his future here in Chicago? Because he's going to be here for 3 more years at least.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what happens. And when you talk about, is there regression? I mean, this whole argument has been, it's not a one-person thing. Yeah, Shane Waldron got fired, but I think over the past few weeks, you and I have both agreed that, this is an execution problem on the player's part. Like this is a play calling issue, and this is a Caleb Williams issue too. Like he has messed up his timing on some of the throws. Some of the times, like decision making, he's holding on to the ball for too long. So I think it's just a very nuanced conversation where it's like yes, didn't have both of your tackles against the Patriots. Your offensive line is not good at all and not protecting him. Yeah, I agree with that. I also agree with the play calling didn't make sense at sometimes. You watch some guys are bunched together for some reason, and everyone's just kind of running next to each other instead of separating and becoming open. So that was a big problem too. But I do think that part of the problem has also been on Caleb, where I just don't think that he talked about wanting to make more layups. I don't think he has hit on some layups though, and that's kind of been the problem. Whether it's a short pass to Roma Dunze, whether it's a short pass to Keenan Allen. I know that those two guys have had a couple drops here in the last few games, but he's also missed them on a couple throws where he's just wide or the timing just feels wrong. So it hasn't looked good as it did during that 3-game winning streak. Where I think you saw a lot of confidence build for him, and you saw him kind of figure things out and figure out, stuff against lesser defenses in the league. And I think the other bigger thing is you weren't going against the top defenses here in the last 3 weeks. Like these were 3 of the, I know why.
Right. That's what's so concerning. Yeah.
Right. I think Washington was like in the middle. But both Arizona and the Patriots, those were not great pass defense. And you saw him have regression there. So, that's kind of why I think you're a little concerned. Hopefully you kind of see Thomas Brown scheme a little bit more, get him quicker passes, understand what the offensive line is going to be. But you really want to see him kind of show you that growth. And hopefully Thomas Brown is able to scheme up some plays where it's easier other than having to expect Caleb trying to figure out what to do 5 or 6 seconds into a play.
Yeah, Robert in the chat says, I think Thomas Brown definitely looks a little bit more inspiring when talking, and hope he walks the walk too. CJ is saying it would be nice to get the short passes going. Let's see. Rick has Caleb's looking gun shy, worried about throwing picks. That's an interesting point because, asked about on Wednesday when Caleb spoke in front of the room, he was asked, sort of to assess his play and what he's done well, what he hasn't done well. And one of the things, the only positive thing he pointed to was not turning the ball over. And yeah, he hasn't thrown a pick since London, hasn't thrown a touchdown pass either, but hasn't thrown a pick, hasn't lost a fumble. And it kind of makes you wonder, just watching that game against New England. I mean, so many of those, and I know the offensive line was injured. I said that earlier too, but so many of those sacks were in the pocket, and you didn't see that escapability, that creativity to avoid tacklers. You didn't see any of that. It almost felt like, I know he didn't have a lot of time back there on some of those, but it just felt like he's trying to avoid making those mistakes. And you wonder if that's being, if that's the message from your defensive head coach is, hey, we can't afford interceptions. We can't afford these mistakes when our defense is playing this well. I think it's fair to wonder that when you have a head coach who's so focused on that defensive side of the football. I know he's in charge of everything, but I feel like that, not necessarily saying that's exactly what's happening here, but if that's something that's affecting Caleb's ability to just play free out there and play the style of football that we saw Caleb Williams play. I mean, you think about that London game, that was the most rushing yards he's had all season. He was, right. Even though, he threw for 4 touchdowns, but he was scrambling. He was making stuff happen with his feet. And that has just been completely gone the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's interesting. I am curious to know whether the conversation has been, you can't force turnover, can't have, it's a conversation that we kind of had earlier in the year, right? Where it's how do you kind of balance, his ability to make big plays and also going for it. And you kind of saw that in the Colts game where, he made a pass that he shouldn't have made down the sideline. And that was a good learning moment for him. And I feel like he's kind of, he has done a better job from that. But I am curious whether, and this kind of goes back to his whole growth thing, right? Where it's just kind of are you stunting his growth? Are you kind of messing up his timing? And that sort of stuff. So it is interesting just to kind of see, how much, I thought this was interesting. I feel like you see this a lot when Caleb is around. I feel like you see Eberflus a lot around him, which is interesting. Obviously, I know he's a head coach, but he's not an offensive coach. So I am curious just to know, he kind of talked about how much of an impact does he have? And is he does his defensiveness kind of come into Caleb's development into being like, well, don't do this, and like you can't afford this, so you shouldn't scramble or be loose with the ball or kind of take shots. So that is an interesting point of just what Caleb has around him and what he's consistently hearing during the week, and how that kind of plays a role into what he's doing on Sunday.
And you do have to wonder too about just the whole structure of this thing. Like, obviously, we talked about it a lot in the offseason. You bring in Shane Waldron as your offensive coordinator. He's running the whole offense. You bring in Thomas Brown as your passing game coordinator. You bring in Kerry Joseph as your quarterback coach. And then you got Ryan Griffin, who's a former quarterback who's got some role within there. And you wonder just about all the voices, like where, is that streamlined or not? And then you hear a quote like what Caleb said when asked about Thomas Brown this week. And I'm reading the direct quote right here. We haven't really talked much throughout this time. And so clearly it was streamlined at some point. Like, you didn't have all four of those guys telling him different things or talking to him at once, but that's a little bit concerning that the guy, this is the guy who's then taking over your offense. And it almost, you wonder if Caleb spent all that time with Shane and now there's a new voice and you're kind of figuring this out on the fly. Like, it doesn't sound like they had a whole lot of one-on-one time throughout the last 9 months or so.
Well, that's kind of interesting just to kind of look at, we're talking about, how different is this going to look under Thomas Brown and what impact is he going to have? And I think you and I even talked about this on Monday's podcast. It's just like, well, we presumed that he was going to take over, and we were kind of like, well, how different is it going to look? He's the passing coordinator. He's been in the rooms. He's been part of the meetings. Like, he's had his input, but maybe he hasn't during this entire time, which is kind of weird and interesting. Just maybe he hasn't had an impact that we all kind of thought that he would have with Caleb. So I think that'll be interesting just to kind of see, you're not going to drastically change the offense or from anything that looks like.
No, you're not.
It's interesting to see what Brown's impact on the offense is going to be and how different it truly is, and whether it's going to have that explosiveness that players are talking about, and whether it's going to have better communication that Eberflus kept, emphasizing, because it just sounded like none of it was working right. And obviously it wasn't working right based on the 4-5 record and the poor performances we've seen over the past 3 weeks.
Yeah. And I'm not even saying that that's necessarily a bad thing that Thomas Brown and Caleb Williams haven't spent a lot of one-on-one time together. Obviously, like Thomas is in the meetings, he's a guy in the room among several. And maybe that's a good thing that you have a guy who has a little bit outside perspective. I do think it's ironic or funny that you're turning to the former coordinator of the Carolina Panthers, who were terrible last year and who seemingly broke Bryce Young with, partially the lack of talent and that offense was all kinds of bad for a lot of different reasons. Sports Chicago Style says, "What can Brown do for us? ? Win." Look, the results are really what's going to matter at the end of the day. Can these guys turn this around? It sounds like the tackles are going to be back this week, or at least they're trending that way. That would be a huge, huge boost, because that was no small thing. But yeah, like Thomas Brown has his work cut out for him, and he has to find some way to get these playmakers involved, because Michael, none of them have really done a whole lot, like at all. These past couple of weeks, Rome had a decent game in Arizona, or at least one big catch, but there hasn't been really anything you can hang your hat on with this offense.
No, and that's kind of what, I wanted to, pick your brain about, is just, it's very clear based on talking to the players and listening to what they said that they're very involved with a lot, right? Like, obviously, the leadership council. I know a lot of guys were kind of like surprised that Shane Waldron got fired, but then there were reports that they went to, the coaching staff saying there needed to be a change. And obviously we've heard the Keenan Allen comments. We've heard the, reports about players wanting Tyson Bagent to take over and all that kind of stuff. And obviously everyone denied that. But I'm just kind of curious to know what your thoughts are about how involved the players are with everything that's going on with this organization at this point, where this isn't a team that's won a Super Bowl. This isn't a team that's won a division by any means. So it's just interesting, where I know that in sports today, we're definitely becoming more player friendly. Obviously, it's not to the level that the NBA is now.
Yeah.
how much is Matt Eberflus giving his players a little bit too much control, too much input? Where, listen, Keenan Allen has missed catches. Roman Dunze has missed catches. Cole Kmet has missed blocks here and there. Like, these veterans have played well, but they've also not made plays. So, and have just kind of been like, well, the offense is bad. Shane Waldron's bad. He's the problem. Let's get rid of him. That's obviously putting it very simply in that kind of stuff and whatever. But I'm just curious to know, like, what your thoughts are about the power it seems like this veteran group seems to have for having not really accomplished much.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's generally a good thing when you got your players involved, and generally speaking, like, you want your veteran leaders to speak up and to be real and to tell it like it is and stuff like that. But at the same time, I mean, I kind of felt this in August, like, you got a team that has accomplished nothing and you're out there naming 18 captains. It's like, that feels like something you do when you've won Super Bowls, and when you absolutely can't leave anybody off that list. You have to have all these veterans on that captain list. I don't know. It certainly starts to ring a little hollow as the season goes along and you're struggling, and some of those veterans are struggling, and obviously the rookie quarterback is struggling, and we've seen this a lot of times with a lot of teams is the finger pointing starts, and having a lot of vocal leaders is a good thing when it's going well, and I think that gets tested during the season. Those things get tested, and can you see who your real leaders are when things like this happen. And I don't know that we necessarily, we don't have definitive answers. We're only halfway through the season. This could go a couple of different ways down the stretch. We're going to have to see how these guys respond. I certainly do think that, on some level, it does start to get a little old when you're hearing these. I mean, we've been hearing about meetings with the Leadership Council and Shane Waldron since week 2. And so, you can only do so many meetings. I know you got meetings all day long, every day at Hallis Hall, whatever. If the results aren't changing on the field, it's not going to matter.
No, and I feel like we kept hearing from different people about how, like, it's the little things, like at practice, like they're not doing this, or like people aren't, going through walkthroughs the full way. And at some point it's like, okay, I guess if you see that as a coach and the coach is being lenient with that, okay. But if you're a team leader, don't you call that out? Like, don't you just like go after whoever's doing that? And you're just like,
if your leadership was really so good, yeah.
Right. Like, you would go after them and you would just be like, hey, like, I see you. You're not going full speed on this walkthrough. You're not going full speed when you're working out. Like, that's what leaders do, right? So it does ring kind of hollow where you're just kind of like, well, Shane didn't do it. He was too loose. Let's all blame Shane for everything that went wrong, as opposed to just being like, well, listen, like, there are a lot of guys who aren't performing the way they did. Nate Davis, obviously, and that's the reason why they cut him this week. You just got tired of that. So, listen, I feel like a lot is going to be placed on, Thomas Brown, Caleb Williams this week. How much are they going to perform better? I think you are expecting a lot and should be expecting a lot from DJ Moore, from Cole Kmet, from Keenan Allen this week, because your veteran leadership needs to. You got essentially what you wanted with the new offense, kind of, and a new leader. Now you got to go out there and perform.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think part of it too is like the hype surrounding this team. Robert's got a question or a comment in here about how so many players are doing podcasts and media type stuff. Like, that's what happens when the expectations are high and look, you do have some good leaders. Like, you do have some well-spoken people on this team. Cole Kmet, Kevin Byard, a bunch of those guys, Mercedes Lewis, those guys all have podcasts with outside the team, and they're well-spoken. And if you're Mercedes Lewis, you're probably thinking about what your next step is, because you're reaching the end here. Although it seems like every single year he gets another chance, so maybe not quite yet. But I think that just comes with the expectations. I don't think any of them expected this team to be where it is right now. Like, yeah, that's fun that's all fun and well if you're winning games and you have a podcast and you're the Kelsey brothers and you're both in the playoffs every single year. But that's the conversations get a little tougher when things don't go so well. And so I don't know. At the end of the day, I do think that's a good thing. Like if the Bears are if the expectations are high and people are talking about the Bears in August and September, that is a good thing. And it's going to lead to opportunities like that for the players. And look, this is like the way that media is now. Like there's opportunities for these players to have their own voices. And I think that's overall, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I'll definitely agree.
I see some comments here about Jaquan Brisker in the chat. Yeah, so if you didn't hear, Jaquan Brisker went on injured reserve yesterday. This is a month already after he suffered a concussion after that big hit against the Panthers on October 6th. He goes, they didn't put him on IR originally. He was still on the active roster. He was just not playing every week. So you're kind of wasting a roster spot. And he went on IR yesterday. He will have to miss at least 4 more games. In total, for the math whizzes out there, that's going to be at least 8 games missed with this concussion. Obviously, you're really concerned for Jaquan. That's not something you want for any player. That's scary stuff when you're talking about a head injury. We're talking about his 3rd concussion in 3 years in the NFL, 3rd diagnosed. You talk about the hits to the head. Like there's no fine line between a concussion or not. Like it's a tricky thing. Like who knows how many concussions some of these guys are having out there that go undiagnosed. You're obviously really concerned for Jaquan, and it's an unfortunate situation.
Yeah, it stinks for him. Obviously, he was playing so well. Not even just this year. He's played well throughout his first couple of years here in the league. And you hate for this to kind of derail his career, right? Like obviously he's a very successful player. He's very talented, but I do like the way that the Bears are kind of dealing with this and just kind of being like, listen, like it's fun. I know you're obviously out there trying to make money. I know you're trying to earn a contract and that sort of stuff, but listen, all the money in the world isn't going to help you if you can't live your life fully because of all these concussions. So it is really good to see, whether that's mandated, whether that's just because the Bears are trying to do what they want to do here. But it's good to see that they're taking this very seriously and not rushing him back into game action.
And there is a very specific concussion protocol that these guys have to pass.
Right. Yeah.
And so I forget I haven't looked at it in a while. There's 4 or 5 steps. So one of those, obviously he's at some step and not being able to advance to the next one. And it sucks that you kind of wasted that time and before you put him on IR, but that's really that's so unimportant when you're talking about stuff like this. You do have to wonder if he's going to come back at all this season.
Yeah.
I mean, in theory, like he has to miss 4 more games, but that still leaves 4 after that. In theory, he could be back. If you go 1-3, do you even want to bring him back or just save him? I don't know what the Bears are thinking there. We didn't get to ask Matt Eberflus about that. That will come up today on Friday. We'll see what Matt has to say. Obviously, that's a real bummer of a situation. The other news that got a little bit overlooked with all this coordinator stuff is Nate Davis is gone. The Bears cut him. They basically ate the contract. They won't have to pay him next year at this point, and he's gone. Nate Davis, your highest paid offensive lineman, started 2 games for you this year, showed up on Sunday with some back tightness, according to Matt Eberflus, and they sent him home, and that was it.
Yeah, mysterious back injury on Sunday when you have a pretty depleted offensive line. I feel like that was probably the final straw for this team. It seems like he was trying to maybe get traded. No one wanted him, and I don't know. It's good that they decided to get rid of him. They didn't let him, fester in the locker room or anything like that. But another interesting move by Ryan Poles, where this was supposed to be his big, offensive line addition last year. He gave him a bigger contract, and that just hasn't worked out well. And that kind of goes to the bigger issue here about Caleb and everything, where it's like your offensive line has not been healthy, but it's also not been good when it has been healthy. And that has been, Ryan Poles not really bringing in the right guys. You haven't really seen much. I know Darnell Wright still has a bright future. Obviously, he hasn't had the season that he's wanted to have this year, a sophomore slump. But listen, that offensive line has now looked good, and that was supposed to be Ryan Poles', like that was supposed to be his thing, right? Like he was supposed to go, like he was supposed to outsmart guys. And almost 3 years in, I don't know, outside of Darnell Wright, if there's a starter on this offensive line that you can build around for your future.
I see CJ wondering if anyone's gonna pick up Nate Davis. I haven't seen anything. I don't think he has been picked up at this point. Obviously, that could change. He's a free agent, so anybody could bring him in. But yeah, like this is. I know that Ryan Poles wants to build this thing through the draft. He said that the day he was hired, and obviously they spend a lot of time and energy scouting the young guys coming up at the college level, scouting what they do on the field, what they do off the field, all that stuff. But you have to wonder if there's more that they could be doing in terms of the off the field stuff with some of these veteran additions. We saw the Chase Claypool thing go down in flames. We saw this Nate Davis thing, just a complete failure. And both of those were largely for off the field things. Like those, yes, they underperformed when they were on the field. Chase Claypool scored 1 touchdown in the Bears uniform. Nate Davis started 13 games over 2 years. But it seems to be like the on the field was not great per se, but that wasn't the big issue with either of these guys. And you wonder if there's something more that they could be doing. I know it's hard to scout guys on other teams. Not hard to scout. Like that's the easy part is scouting their on-field performance, but it's hard to get a true read into somebody who's playing for another team. That's always going to be a little bit of a question mark, but so far, at least with these 2 instances, it was not good for the Bears.
Yeah, there's part of the process that isn't working, right? Even if you want to go into the coaches, like obviously with everything that happened last year with your defensive coordinators and that kind of stuff, and some of the coaches you had to let go. It is interesting whether you kind of look at it, reevaluate your process here. Whether it's now, whether it's during the off season, and you're just kind of like, well, something clearly isn't working here because I don't know whether they're just taking a gamble on their shot and they're just being like, the talent is there. Maybe our locker room can fix whatever is going on off the field and that sort of stuff. But it hasn't worked, right? And I think you're seeing more and more people kind of question Ryan Poles, where, yes, he's had the great success of fleecing the Carolina Panthers. And obviously you got the number 1 pick and you got Caleb Williams. And that's all great and good. And obviously you traded for Montez Sweat last year. And the secondary has looked great. So there's been a lot of good stuff. But the offensive line hasn't really developed at all, and you haven't seen that developed. And some of the choices that he's made, I think a lot of people are interested in just being like, well, you drafted a punter instead of an offensive lineman last year and that sort of stuff. So, the whole process needs to be evaluated, and I think a lot of people are becoming more and more kind of like wary on Ryan Poles as opposed to the high that I think everyone had at the beginning of the season.
And all of this is adding up to, they're going to have 3 picks, probably all in the top 50, maybe all in the top 45, top 40 next year, depending how bad this goes for the Bears and Panthers here down the stretch. I'd be shocked if they're not spending a lot of time looking at the offensive linemen in this draft. That's so clearly the weakest part of this team, that it has to be what they're looking at. Mike Johnson also wonders if Keenan Allen has lived up to the cost to acquire him.
I would say
that was a 4th round pick that they sent for Keenan. I mean, production wise, yeah, like it has. He had 1 good game. He caught a couple of touchdowns against the Jaguars in London, and really, that's been about it. So I mean, I think it's totally fair to if your answer is no, I can't really dispute that.
No, and it's just kind of like also like he had you knew that he was injury prone too, and you kind of dealt with that at the beginning of the season as well, right? So, those were important games for, Caleb to have Keenan in. And again, it's hard to say whether was this a Shane Waldron problem? Was this Keenan Allen not getting open? But Keenan Allen was supposed to be like Caleb's safety net, right? Like he was supposed to be up the middle, 5 or 6 yards, 5 or 10 yards, whatever. And he was supposed to be there, and he hasn't been there at all. So at this point, I would say no, maybe that turns around, maybe he figures it out, maybe they get a better connection. But especially if you don't extend him, I don't know if it was really worth the commitment or worth the trade, because for a year that has been lackluster, I feel like you could have gotten something else for a fourth rounder.
26 catches for 241 yards and 2 touchdowns. He did miss 2 games with injury. He's appeared in seven contests at this point. Yeah, I mean, you could have 4 years of look, a 4th round pick is still a bit of a crapshoot. I mean, it's not a 7th round pick necessarily, but it's still, you don't necessarily know if you're going to get a good player or not. But I mean, when you're talking about your only lineman drafted was, Karana Magaji out of Yale, when you're taking a guy from the Ivy League, like that's going to come with question marks. Like,
right.
You maybe wish it, and he's been injured. Yeah. You maybe wish you could have taken another swing and given yourself 2 options. The more swings you take, the more chances you have that you're going to hit on it. There is a game this week. I know he said that at the top. There is a game this week. We're running low on time, so we gotta dive into our thoughts here on this Packers week. Like I said earlier, like I didn't give the Packers a second of thought until maybe like yesterday afternoon. With everything that's been going on, I don't know how you can't be concerned about this if you're a Bears fan. This is probably the worst possible opponent at the worst possible time. Would you agree with that, Michael?
Yeah, especially since the Packers had a bye week. I think that they kind of, took a beating against the Lions a couple of weeks ago. I think maybe if they didn't have the bye week, you'd be like, oh, maybe you're catching them at the right time. But I don't think you're fighting the Packers at the right time.
Real quickly, we'll run through our pregame segments here. Our game within the game, Michael, is there a position? Is there an individual matchup? What are you watching between Bears Packers this weekend?
I'm looking forward to can this defense stop Josh Jacobs, and I think Green Bay has one of the top rushing attacks in the league, like top 8, top 10, somewhere like that. And Jacobs has looked good for the Packers. Obviously, Aaron Jones is good too. They're able to replace him there, but this Bears defense, for some reason, has just not been able to stop the run. And it's been interesting because a lot of the guys are the same, right? You haven't really changed too many guys. And now you don't have Andrew Billings in the middle there to clog things up. And I think you saw some good things from Javon Dexter and Zach Pickens last week, but you're missing a big guy in there. So can this defensive line stop Josh Jacobs? Can they get past the offensive line to kind of create some negative plays? But I think that's going to be really important, because if the Packers are able to run it against you and then open up the pass, I think it's going to be a really long day.
Yeah, Josh Jacobs is having a really nice year. He's in 9 games, 762 yards, only 3 touchdowns, but he's racking up the yards there. The Packers, you just look a little deeper, EPA per play, they're 12th. EPA, that's overall. Let me find rushing here. EPA per rush, they're 10th in the NFL. So they're finding success on the ground, and we've talked about it for weeks. That's the one thing the Bears defense can be a little bit leaky about. And obviously with Andrew Billings gone, that's super concerning. I think that's a really good game within the game. I'm going to cheat a little bit here. This is not actually on the field. I'm going Thomas Brown versus Shane Waldron. That is my game within the game. Obviously, we are all curious to see what Thomas Brown looks like as the offensive coordinator. He's going to be upstairs. You're not going to see him on the sideline. They'll probably show a shot of him in the booth or whatever on the TV. But can he get any sort of semblance of some cohesiveness for this offensive group? Can they get any rhythm going? I don't even know if this is a game that really. It's weird to say this in Packers week, but I really don't know if this is a typical Packers game. I don't know if this is a game where you really even are all that worried about the opponent. Look, I don't think the Bears are going to win this game. I think they got a real uphill battle here. I think if the Bears offense looks better than it has, if they score a touchdown or two, I think you count that as a win. Like you got to. This is going to have to be an incremental process here. And I think that some cohesiveness, some layups for Caleb Williams. If this offense looks good, I think that's a win, whether the Bears win or not.
Yeah, unfortunately, and I don't think the Bears wanted to be in this position, obviously, but I think we're back to moral victories, right? Which I don't think that this wasn't what this season was supposed to be.
Nobody likes to hear that.
No, and like Ryan Pohl said at the beginning, you saw it at Hard Knocks. Remember Hard Knocks? Remember all the good vibes during the summer? What a long month that was. What a
R.I.P. Crash.
was. But yeah, I mean, you're back in moral victories, right? Like you're just kind of like trying to score a touchdown. That's a big thing for this offense right now. So yeah, I think that'll be really interesting just to kind of see how is this offense different and how is it able to kind of capitalize and pick up on big plays and kind of give you hope here heading into the final few games of the season.
Okay, most valuable Bear, guys. If you want to leave your most valuable Bear thoughts in the comments, I'll throw them up on the screen. Last week it was game number 9 for the Bears. We were tied coming into the week 4-4. Let's see. I went with you went first. You went with Caleb Williams. I went with Montez Sweat. Montez got 1 assisted tackle for me, and that was it. And so with a paltry 6.3 fantasy points, Caleb Williams and you, Michael, pick up the victory. You're in the lead for the first time all year. You've stormed back. You're up 5-4 in the most valuable Bear best of 17 series here. The good news for me, if there's good news, is that I get to go first this week. So I'm going to go first. I'm going to bet on Thomas Brown leaning on that run game. I'm taking DeAndre Swift. I don't feel good about anything. There's not a single pick that I could make that would make me feel good going into this week. So I'm going to bet on the former running back leaning on the run game.
Yeah, that's fair. I think you've seen DeAndre Swift do that throughout the season too. So I probably would have chosen him if I got the opportunity. Now I'm trying to think of who I would want to take. But yeah, I do think that DeAndre Swift would be good.
Robert says Roschon or Swift. Sports Chicago Style also likes Roschon Johnson. Mike says Cole Kmet. Rick has Thomas Brown. Love it. Love the confidence there. CJ has a Tyreek Stevenson redemption game. That would be fun. Michael, where's your head at? What are you thinking for your most valuable Bear selection?
I think I'm going to go with. I'm not going Caleb. I don't think I can do that. But I first of all, I'm not going to waste it because I only have one more Caleb pick left for the year. But I do think I'll go with DJ Moore. I think that this is a big. I think this is a big rebound game for him. I think that he's tired of being asked about his relationship with Caleb Williams. I think he's tired of being asked because he tried to bench Caleb Williams for Tyson Bagent. I think he's really frustrated. He was very frustrated, obviously, with Shane Waldron. Listen, like he got paid, right? Like he got his new contract.
He did.
He got his money. I think that this is time where he's kind of like, all right, like I need to show it. Like I need to show that I'm this team's number one threat. I'm this team's number one offensive player. I've seen a lot of people say, should Rome Odunze be your number one wide receiver and use them more and be him explosive rather than DJ Moore? And I think you see the players say that all the time, but I do think that DJ sees that, and I think he sees the comments, and I think this is a big game for him. So I'm going to go with him. I think he has a big rebound game here.
I like that pick. I thought long and hard about going with DJ. At the end of the day, I like I said, I settled on Swift because it's a new coordinator. I think they do commit to the run. Rick is wondering about injuries. Sorry guys, we got lost in the conversation earlier. Injury-wise, the tackles are both trending upwards. Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright have been limited, but they're both back at practice this week. We'll have to wait and see the Friday injury report. We touched on Jaquan. Obviously, he's not coming back. Tevin Jenkins has not been back. He's been out with the ankle injury. I would imagine Tevin's not going to play. So optimistically, if both your tackles play, you have Ryan Bates, you have Coleman Shelton, you probably kick Matt Pryor over to left guard. That's probably what you're looking at on the offensive line. Defensively, Montez Sweat sat out Wednesday, then he was limited on Thursday with the ankle injury. I'd say that's probably up in the air, maybe 50-50. Obviously trending in the right direction. He returned to practice. Darrell Taylor has also been limited, but has been out there practicing. So that's that's positive development for him. He did not play last week, so it would be good to get. Obviously, you want both those guys in there. If you're the Bears, that's really going to help your pass rush. Michael, your surprise prediction. What are you thinking? Is there anything that we're not talking about that you see happening on Sunday?
I think that I have 1A and 1B. 1A is going to be my major one, but then 1B I'm going to put there as well. I think that the Bears end up with, I don't want to go as high as 2. I think they'll have 2 interceptions against Jordan Love.
Okay.
I think Jordan Love loves to take opportunities. A lot of people have compared him to Brett Favre. He likes to take his chances. And this defense has just consistently created turnovers. So I do think that this defense will create 2 turnovers, 2 interceptions, and they'll get into Jordan Love. And my 1B is we're going to see Tyler Scott this week. I think Thomas Brown is probably like, why have you not used this guy with the speed? And I think he's going to get involved. So that's those are my 2 surprises.
That's an interesting point. Just with a new coordinator coming in, how do the snap counts change? How does the usage of certain guys change? That's a good prediction. I like that. Maybe we do see a little Tyler Scott action in there. I know some folks in the comments would love to see that. Jordan Love. I mean, he leads the NFL with 10 interceptions. I like that pick. I do think that you can get him to make some mistakes, and that's certainly an area that the Bears have been really, really good at. I also had 1A, 1B. I was all over the place with my surprise prediction. One of my options was Jordan Love doesn't throw an interception, because I think that would be surprising. He has thrown an interception in every single game, and I think if he doesn't, that would surprise everybody. My tongue-in-cheek one was that the Bears score a touchdown. Obviously, everybody would really like it. But then as I was thinking about it more, and I think this is the one people are about to be really mad at me. As I was thinking about it really more, I thought, what if the Bears don't score a touchdown? Like, what if we get a 3rd consecutive game with no touchdowns? I don't think that that's crazy. And so I'm throwing those.
It's going to be a really tough podcast.
I'm throwing those things out there. I don't know what's going to happen in this game. Every one of those things would be a surprise on some level, but I wouldn't rule it out. I think that this is going to be a tough matchup for the Bears.
Yeah, it's not. Listen, like, I'm all for the bump. I'm all for this offense maybe looking a little bit different, but I don't, based on what we've seen and how this offensive line still isn't 100% healthy. I don't think this is going to be close.
Okay, we got to wrap it up here. Last one, game pick. Who you got, Michael, and what's your score?
Green Bay wins pretty easily, unfortunately. Again, I think Matt LaFleur will still be undefeated against the Bears, which is an incredible feat, considering you play against each other twice every single year, and there was a pandemic. I think the Packers win. I'll go with a 28-13 win. I think the Bears get on the board, but I don't think that they're able to stop the run attack, and I don't think this offense really clicks as much as people want it to.
Yeah, I was debating what to do with the score as well. I'm taking the Packers, and you know what? I'm just going to lean into it. I'm going to say Packers 20, Bears 9, and maybe they don't score a touchdown. People can throw things at their screen if they're mad at me hearing that, but I don't know. I'm going to lean into it. Why not? We're at this point. It's been a rough week for Bears fans. Obviously, that's not what I want to happen. I think that you want to see this offense make some progress. And I do think that there's the opportunity to do that. I just think this is a tough matchup at probably the worst possible time.
And I think this goes back to why so many people were like, should you fire Shane Waldron after the Cardinals game? Because then you had a week to kind of prepare against a lesser defense like the Patriots, right? Like, you had an opportunity to kind of like, all right, like, you're not playing the best. You're not playing a great team. Maybe you can workshop some stuff, whatever. But, to expect Thomas Brown to be the savior against the Green Bay Packers, I mean, you're really asking a lot here on Sunday.
And I hope I'm wrong. Look, the coach bump is real, or at least it's real when it comes to head coaches. I don't know how real it is with your coordinators. We saw the Saints win a game last week against the Falcons. It happens. And so maybe I'm completely wrong on this. And the Bears look really good on offense and win the game. We'll have to wait and see on Sunday. Thank you to everyone who has joined us live. Once again, hit the thumbs up. That's a great way to support the show. We would really appreciate it. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, leave us a review. Keep an eye on our Twitter pages. I'm at Sean_Hammond. He is at MDwojak94. We will let you know when we're going to go live. We're trying to go live every Monday and Friday during the season, but we're going to let you know if the time changes, if the date changes, all that stuff. Head to shawlocal.com. Read our work there. All of our Bears coverage is up there. We got lots of high school football coverage. If you live in Illinois, it's getting down to the nitty gritty in the playoffs. Follow Michael's high school football coverage and everybody over at Friday Night Drive, shawlocal.com. And please consider subscribing. That is the #1 best way to support us. For Michael Dwojak, I'm Sean Hammond. This has been the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. Thanks for listening, everybody, and have a great weekend.